It was May 2017. I stood among a veritable melting pot of people, multiple generations, nationalities, and identities were represented as we clutched our hearts with our right hand, sang the national anthem, and beamed with pride to finally call ourselves American citizens. This country has provided me with an exemplary education. This country has gifted me the opportunity to work at extraordinary institutions like our beloved Temple Emanu-El. This country has afforded me an excellent quality of life, and this country has allowed my children to thrive. I am proud to be an American. I am proud to live in this country. And yet, I am deeply, deeply troubled by the recurring waking nightmare that has plagued this country and is only increasing in frequency and severity: gun violence. Firearms are now the leading cause of death for American children and teens, more than motor vehicle accidents, more than childhood cancers, more than drowning, and more than COVID. This country's gun homicide rate is 26 times that of other high-income nations. This past weekend, my family soared with pride and jubilation as our youngest son became bar mitzvah. But just days later, our joy was muted by this horrific school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in which 19 students and 2 teachers were killed. Processing the shooting with the newest young adult in our house, my wife looked at him and said, "Jonah, I'm so sorry that I can't protect you from these heinous acts of violence." Those were her parting words as she sent him off to school. Every morning we send our children to school knowing in the back of our minds what could happen, what might happen. It is simply awful that our kids have to practice lockdowns and active shooter drills, but it's beyond the pale that since the beginning of this year, barely 6 months in, 83 children have been wounded in school shooting incidents, and 47 have died because of them. Right here, in this great country. We have all the statistics. We have the years of witnessing. Now, what in the world does it take for us to transition from empty sentiments and moments of silence to action? Upon hearing of this latest tragedy, our president fought back tears as he exclaimed, "As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name will we stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name will we do what has to be done?" Friends, we are here in this house of God's name, a name we bless each and every time we usher in the Sabbath. And Jewish clergy are often asked to offer the Jewish perspective on school shootings. It honestly pains me that it's a perspective that I've had to ever share. Well, our religion values the sanctity of human life above all else. With 613 commandments to guide our way, all of the stringent rules and guidelines for living are overruled when it comes to an individual's health and safety. pikuach nefesh, the saving of one's souls. It is our religious filibuster. It overrules each and every law. Life is that precious to us. In fact, in Judaism, we hold each life to be so sacred that we are commanded never to count people. The over-exact listing or counting of people for any cause is prohibited because it is said that counting a person lowers their existence to that of any commonplace object. But people are made in the image of God, and each and every one of us are sacred. But some may ask, what about the oppositional rhetoric about freedom? What is the Jewish response to that? Well, in this week's Torah portion, aptly timed to coincide with Memorial Day weekend, we celebrate liberty. Leviticus 25:10 offers the imperative, proclaim liberty throughout the land. Howard Sovransky, CEO of Jewish Federation, offers, as Americans and Jews, liberty presents our goal of eliminating the bonds that restrain us. And freedom refers to our individual right to exercise free will based on our own abilities. These two values, though different, are both found in our Torah. Liberty allows us the freedom to exercise choice and pursue our dreams. And when we add justice to the mix, we capture the core, the essence of our American Jewish dream: liberty, freedom, and justice. But many Americans opposing gun control only view freedom as freedom to. The Torah also recognizes freedom as freedom from. A healthy individual is one who is free from the need to intimidate another, free from the fear of cold-blooded murder. A healthy society is one in which intimidation is simply not permitted. It is long past time for our country to engage in the very Jewish exercise of self-introspection. When will the so-called patriots of this country look within themselves and see the value of lives as more important than upholding an amendment ratified more than 230 years ago? Imagine for a moment stepping back in time to 1791 and explaining to James Madison about semi and automatic weapons and what his Second Amendment would encompass centuries after its inception. Imagine that. The Talmud proclaims, Kol Yisrael Arabim ze bazeh. All of Israel are responsible for one another. And though I offer the Jewish perspective, this is not a Jewish problem. It is certainly not just a Jewish problem. I can safely say that most religions would lead to the same obvious conclusion that protecting life is priority number one. Period. Now we reach the part of the sermon when I would normally offer nechemta, words of consolation. But I must admit, I don't have many. What words could possibly console the family that had to wait in line at a civic center in complete chaos only to find that their 10-year-old was just killed? No, I don't have great words of consolation to offer, but I do have emotions that toggle between deep despair, total rage, and abject frustration. Actions are what we need. One of our 12-year-old bar mitzvah students, while working with our wonderful tutor, Cantor Jonathan Commissar, spontaneously interrupted his chanting and asked, Did you hear what happened to those kids' school in Texas? Cantor Commissar's response was, yes, it was horrible. The student continued, I'm going to create a website with a petition and hopefully get 50,000 signatures and send it to Biden and Congress. I'm going to work with a friend of mine and a counselor from camp, and we are going to start with the parents of our campers and then go from there. This student offers us a tiny glimpse of faith and hope for a future without staggering incidents of gun violence. And so as we conclude this last portion in the book of Leviticus, we end with our prophet Samuel's charge, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. Be strong, and let us be strengthened. So here we are celebrating what is the joy of the Sabbath, undoubtedly tainted by tragic loss of life. As the psalmist teaches us, even in our depths of despair, we can find ways to praise the eternal. We heard this from our rabbi in her beautiful introduction to this evening's service. Tonight we give praise while acknowledging the heaviness of our hearts. We pray for one another, and we pray for the healing that so many in our country have to find as they process the loss of their own children. This song of healing, composed by Yaakov Feit, based on Psalm 147, helps us to engage in that intersection between praise and brokenness. We invite you to sing it with us if you feel so inspired. The lyrics will be projected on our screens. Healer of the brokenhearted, binder of wounds, counter of uncountable stars, you know who we are. Harofel ishvur elev umchabesh le'atzvotav mone mispar לכוכבים לכולם שמו יקרא